Oh, darn. Welcome, everybody, as you come in. We'll get started in about 3 minutes.
Now, I did this before. I did it on 2 machines, but they signed me out of this one. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can.
Okay, they said they signed me out. Yep. Okay, never mind. I have all my clocks set at different times. I have the one on my desk like 6 minutes ahead because then I think I'm late and I get, I think I can get more done than I usually can. So then I leave and I'm hurry, hurry, hurry. to the next thing. My watch is only 2 minutes ahead. I can't set my car clock 6 minutes ahead like I used to. It doesn't, whatever this new technology is, it likes to do the precise time.
Are we using Verizon time tonight?
That's what I'm using.
Okay.
Which means we have a minute before we begin.
Okay.
All right.
And I'm going to start right on time so it gives everyone an opportunity to speak and say everything they want to say.
Thank you.
Well, it's 7 o'clock and we're going to get started. Good evening and welcome to tonight's webinar, Why Do PK Students Need STEM? Presented by the Ohio Mathematics and Science Coalition, an advocacy group comprised of individuals from the education, business, and public sectors, working together towards the common goal of revitalizing and improving science, technology, engineering, and mathematics STEM education from preschool to beyond graduate school. My name is Nancy Sattler, and I'm the chair of OMSC. On behalf of OMSC, I want to thank our co-sponsors, OCTM, Ohio PTA, Ohio MATIC, Ohio section of the MAA, SECO, OMILC, and Ohio Technology and Engineering Educators Association. A special thanks to the Teaching and Learning Collaborative, who is also a co-sponsor and has provided the platform for tonight's webinar. Thank you to the organizers of tonight's webinar, Kim York, Janet Horelko, and Jim Mamer, as well as all of the members of the Ohio Advocacy or OMSC Advocacy Committee, whose names are listed here. A few housekeeping issues. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on our website. Please use the chat feature of Zoom by scrolling to the bottom of your screen and clicking on chat. You will be able to make comments or ask questions there. Our panelists for tonight are Elementary Science Presidential Awardee Stephanie Norwalk and Elementary Mathematics Presidential Awardee Chrissy Pratt. Stephanie Norwalk is an elementary educator with 29 years of experience with 3rd and 4th grade students. She has worked with the Ohio Department of Education as a leading member of both the Science Model Curriculum Development Team and the Science Regional Leader Network. Stephanie is passionate about integrating the process of science to promote collaboration, problem solving, and creative thinking across the subject areas. She believes it is important for students to understand that everything is interconnected and that our actions have results. Those actions have the power to impact our future. Chrissy Pratt is certified to teach grades pre-K through 3 and K through 12 special education, mild moderate, with a K through 12 reading endorsement. She has worked for 12 years as a special and regular education teacher. Chrissy has served as both president and secretary of the Central Ohio Council of Teachers of Mathematics, which is an affiliate of the Ohio Council of Teachers of Mathematics. She was also a member of the Computer Science Standards Writing Team for the Ohio Department of Ed. She served on the STEM leadership team for her school. Tonight's moderator is Jim Mamer. Jim is a secondary mathematics presidential awardee and has taught 6th, 7th, and 8th grade math for 29 years. For the past 6 years, Jim has worked for Hamilton City Schools, first as the assistant director of math programs, and more recently as a math coach after retiring and coming back to work. He is a member of OCTM, NCTM, WSUCTM, and is about to become the vice president of OCTM. I will now turn the discussion over to Jim to moderate the panel discussion. Why do pre-K through 4 students need STEM? Jim?
Thank you, Nancy. So on this page here, we have a definition for STEM, and it's from a powerful group, and it says STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and more. Quality STEM experiences connect learning to real-world problems and solutions. At STEM schools, teachers design lessons for students to connect with local businesses, the community, while they plan, develop, and test new ideas. Through these experiences, STEM education fosters the next generations of innovators. As Nancy spoke a minute ago, she said that I was a middle school classroom teacher for 29 years. Our school was not a quote unquote STEM school. So I'm really looking forward tonight to hearing from 2 rock star teachers in our state who really, I think, have got a lot more experience on the STEM front than I do. But at the same time, I want to encourage everybody, if we have regular classroom teachers out here in the audience, or if we have parents listening, I would like to challenge you and encourage you to feel good about any time that you allow a child the opportunity to be curious, to wonder, to then experiment, to try to figure out some solutions to whatever the questions are that they have, and then to reflect on, is what we're thinking or doing or trying working or not? And if it's not, well, let's go back and try again. Because even though we may not call ourselves STEM parents or a STEM school, I have a feeling if you're doing those things, we're also supporting STEM type thinking. But I really am looking forward to our elementary teachers tonight, because I think they're going to give us a lot more concrete and great ideas regarding this. So next up, we have a slide here. It talks about our themes for our conversation tonight. Our first one is we're saying we believe all kids, all adults, all people need to not fear the word STEM, and we all deserve the opportunity to experience it. It can be practiced easily at home as well as in schools. We want to have everybody feel like they can engage in STEM-like activities. I wanted to give 2 quick scenarios before we begin, and I think I'm on time here. I've got 3 minutes left. So the first one has to do with my 2 sons. I quite frankly did not work as hard as I could have in school. I'm not afraid to admit it. I married a good woman later in life who had a great work ethic. And when I went to college, that's where I kind of took the passion to working hard and being a good person. With our 2 sons, there'd never been an engineer on my side of the family. My oldest son chose to go accounting and finance, and he loves his career. His career was not defined by subjects he could or could not pass in school, which I'm very proud of. My youngest son, the same thing happened for him, and he chose to go into engineering. During my 29 years of being a middle school classroom teacher, I had lots of students become engineers and come back and say hi to me, but I never knew what that meant to be an engineer. I preached it. I told my kids, hey, if you work hard and you're a good person and you work hard in class, you can become engineers. But it was interesting to me when my own son chose to be that. And that's when I learned about 5, 6, 7 years ago what it meant to be an engineer. My son basically said, Dad, I'm an industrial engineer. And basically, I go help companies become more efficient. We go solve problems. And I love it. And it's really nice if we're trying to help all kids be able to choose a path that they want to in life. My last thing that I'm going to say here before we get started is I had this really, really surreal experience yesterday. I went with my wife. I'm in Savannah, Georgia, because my youngest son got married last weekend. We went to a restaurant yesterday, but we had to go pick our food up outside in a parking lot. As we were waiting, there were lots and lots of people standing around in this parking lot waiting for food to come to them. There was a gentleman talking with his coworker. And as they were talking, he seems like such a positive person. So I started talking with him. Come to find out, he helps run a roofing company. And he was with his coworker, and they had come to buy a bunch of food for the guys who were back on top of a roof working. How does this play into tonight? The man's standing there out of the blue. He doesn't know who I am or what I do, but he says, my attitude on life is, and you've probably heard this before, but it resonated more with me yesterday. He said, my attitude towards life is there are no problems, there are only solutions. And all I could think about was just think if we could help more children think like that, and if we could help more adults think like this. I've heard it before, that statement, but hearing it from him yesterday meant a lot to me, knowing that I was going to help moderate this session tonight. There are no problems in life. There's only solutions. So with that, we're going to hear from 2 ladies tonight who I believe emulate those beliefs. I bet you anything. I've talked with them several times through internet now, and I'm really excited to let them shine. So we'll go on here. I have one last thing. I apologize. One more slide here. These are where some of our references come from. And I'm going to focus in on the middle one because my background was in math, but all 3 of these organizations have many overlying themes that are the same. And one that really strikes me is the first mathematical practice in for our Ohio Department of Education. And it's this. We want students, mathematical practice number 1 of 8 practices is we want kids and adults to become better at making sense of problems and to be willing to persevere in solving them. We can do this from the youngest of ages until the oldest of ages like me. There's times where I get frustrated about problems in real life and I'm like, come on, Jim, you've got to live this. This first practice isn't just about math, it's about life. The problems don't have to have numbers in them. Okay, so with that, here are the questions that I'm going to be asking our 2 participants tonight. I'm going to ask each of these questions, and they're going to take turns answering back and forth on each question, and we'll work our way through all 4/5 of these questions. At the end of the evening, we'll have hopefully about 8 to 10 minutes left, and if you guys have some more questions that you want to ask us about, you can put them into our chat. So thank you, and we'll get started here. And as that's going on, I'm going to have some slides in the background that we switch about every 3 to 4 minutes, which will share some STEM classrooms around the state and around the country and around the world. So Chrissy, I believe we're going to have you up first. And the first question is, can you tell us a little bit about who and how you teach?
Yeah, so I currently teach 2nd grade. I have previously taught 3rd grade, and I've also taught special education. I'm currently located in New Albany, which is a suburb about 30 minutes northeast of Columbus. I have a very diverse classroom of learners. So we have varying academic, behavioral, social emotional needs in my classroom. I also have a handful of students who are multilingual. So some of the languages that my students speak are Russian, Hindi, Swahili, Chinese. And I say that just to say, I have a very diverse classroom. We have a lot of different learning needs, as I'm sure many of you do who are watching this. And so I always like to kind of share the population of students that I work with and have worked with, because I think it's really important to understand, like Jim said, that no matter what population of students you're working with, all students can access a STEM and should access a STEM curriculum and have that opportunity. So kind of how I approach teaching, I have a lot of integrated experiences for my students. So really thinking about how can the skills that students gain from a STEM curriculum fit into other content areas. So for example, thinking about how can computer science be connected to mathematics, or how can that be connected to writing? A lot of inquiry and exploration focus, especially as far as science goes. So we recently did a nature scavenger hunt in the wetlands near my school, where we got to go out and look for changes in the environment caused by animals. I was telling some of my coworkers, we started that off, we started our morning off that way, and my students were the best behaved they had been all school year. And I really think it was just spending an hour and a half outside, or however long we were out there, just collaborating and being in nature and doing a science activity. It just made all the difference for a lot of my students. I do a lot of notice wonder. I've started to, we're in October now, so I've started to hear my students say it to each other, or say, I noticed this, or I wonder this.
Hey, Chrissy, can you hold it for just 1 second?
Yeah.
I remember hearing that statement or that phrase like maybe 10, 12 years ago, and I'm seeing it more and more, that I know, what are you noticing? What are you wondering? Correct? And you're in the people that are listening, you should write that one down. If you want to help making more and more children inquisitive and encourage that thinking, critical thinking, that is a great prompt on a lot of things. What are you noticing? What are you wondering? I'm sorry.
No, that's great. It also gives access to a lot of your students, because everyone can notice or wonder something. So it might not start out as along the lines of what you're thinking, but then you can start to get them to think, well, what might a mathematician notice? Or what might a scientist wonder about this? So we do a lot of that. Conceptual understanding is really valued in my classroom over rote memorization and procedures, focusing on the process rather than the answer, and having students communicate, collaborate, give each other feedback. We do a lot of gallery walks where students get to walk around and look at the work of others and leave feedback, a lot of turn and talks. And I will say, it's not always easy at first. It's not easy at first. It takes a lot of practice, and students really have to get used to the routine. But once they're able to do it, it really is just phenomenal. So I would say overall, when I think about the way I teach, I really try to facilitate learning so that students are the sense makers and the problem solvers.
Incredible. No wonder you're a presidential awardee.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay, Stephanie.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Nowak, and I teach in Mentor, Ohio at Fairfax Elementary. I was at a previous elementary school in Mentor, and they shut down our school, and it's sadly no longer there. So it was a bit of a shift moving schools. And then I had taught third grade for 23 years, and then I was moved to fourth. So I've always kind of been in the 3-4, but I have taught kindergarten and coached at the middle school and high school level. So it's just an interaction with all kids. And just a little bit about me, so you know, I have twins, and they are at 2 different ends of the spectrum. So a lot of what I do, and even more so now, and this kind of goes to what Chrissy was saying about the dynamics in her classroom. Each year, especially after COVID, the dynamics seem to be changing more and more from what traditional school is perceived as by a lot of people. And a lot of these experiences, being able to give those kids voice and choice and ownership, makes a world of difference. We just got done doing parade floats, actually in social studies, but we integrated primary and secondary resources, and then we integrated timelines where they created them on Timeline Maker. And I'm not in a traditional STEM school. I teach all subjects. What I've always had a passion for, and what I've always seen kids excel at, is when you can make learning connected. So a lot of times people hear that STEM word, and it kind of isolates out those subject areas when it's really not meant to do that. It's just a way to get people and families to realize, okay, all these things are happening when you're problem solving. There's things about science, there's things that about math. Our kids are whizzes now with technology. Sometimes they're showing us, but it's that different way to look at something. In regards to the parade floats, I kind of gave them a boundary, an outline of what I expected on their floats, but I gave them the freedom to create. And with that, the outcome was shocking. And I say that because I was even surprised. But then we took technology a step further, and they recorded about their parade floats so that we could put them in QR codes, and other classes could, go up and with their iPad scan them and listen to them. So the reason I like to do things like that is other people, I learn from others. I learn from the people I meet and interact with, seeing different things. If you even have a chance to even take a look at these images that Jim's placing on the screen, and you might say, well, like, why is that important? Well, if you notice, the kids are facilitating it. They're the problem solvers. The teacher it's not a sit and get. It's definitely an engaging learning. And if you can find the hook, in all my years, what I've noticed the most is your struggling kids, your behavior kids, they seem to shine with this type of learning. It kind of evens the playing field. It's not rote memorization. It's not writing, research reports. It's problem solving, working together, communicating, all those life skills that we want our children to have. And that's why it's important to me. So I look to the curriculum and I look for a lot of connections. So all the different units I've created have come with an idea, and then it just unfolds and unravels. And the connectedness is really what brings all of this together. The learning for the kids and all the content area as a teacher to produce for them.
I know it sounds bad, or it'll come across, this will come across wrong, but all the different phrases you guys have said, this is being video recorded. If somebody go back and listen to this, you really should listen closely to the numerous things that they said in the last 10 minutes. I'm not kidding. I've been teaching for a long time, and I get to coach a lot of people. The things that you guys are saying are so on target. And I was teasing about the presidential award before, but I know these are the things that our state asks us to look for and want us to do in our classrooms. And it's so awesome to hear you two doing this. I hope you're getting a chance to impact others in your district and in your county and in our state, even more than just like what we're doing tonight, or even in your own classrooms, because it's incredible. All right, so our next question, this was 2 questions, and I can't remember if they're both going to speak on it or if one's going to speak on one and one's going to speak on the other. We'll be fine with however you guys want to do this. And Stephanie is going to speak first, but the question is, why do you think STEM is important at your grade level or at this grade level? And how does a STEM curriculum relate to real world problem solving, both in and out of the classroom, even though you've already started addressing that somewhat?
Yeah. I can provide an example because a lot of times speaking to it, I could answer that question, but I think it's painting that picture for people so that they can see it. And so one of the science things we do is figure out why we have sand at the beach. We do weathering and erosion. And I, got an email from a parent, my son went all into how this ended up here and whatnot. And that's happened over my career in a number of different ways. Every year about this time, I teach my class, and this is in Ohio. This is a problem in Ohio, but the bats in Ohio have white nose syndrome, and the kids, they've now been researching them, looking at bat cams. We are now in the midst of reading biographies on these different bats that are up for adoption in Bat World. And it started with this problem. And we looked at data on a map and how it changed over time. And it was painting this whole picture of there's this little problem that happens to be in our backyard, but look, it started here and the next year it went to here. And all these maps and these facts and these numbers, that is your mathematics. The people that are going out and figuring out, how to fix this problem, those scientists, because people don't realize that, bats, the insect population is controlled by them. So like if we don't control the insect population naturally, then you have your pesticides, you have your crops being destroyed. So that interconnectedness, and kids go into the store and they look at things differently. I have parents through the years that have, I remember when my kid came home saying this, and but it's really trying to look for something that kids can relate to. And I always go to animals. First of all, they're a passion for me, I think, for most kids. But I think if you can connect it at home, like you guys have probably had bats outside, or you might live by a pond and you're going to go see them, and it's going to change your perception of them. And that's what I think good teachers do. Like, they open up that perception. It opens it up to looking at things and how it impacts not just Ohio, but worldwide. I mean, we saw it living through COVID. We saw the impact of what occurred. We saw the impact on learning. And so the parents saw it. And so at home, being able to talk about these things, have these deep, rich discussions with different concepts. And it could be something as easy as, oh, great, we're snowed in, the power's out. Now what do we do? And it's things that start young that you probably don't even realize you already do. It's the whole part of, it's things you do. It's not just sitting down and just reading, or sitting down and figuring out a math problem. It's related. So go ahead, Chrissy.
Yeah, that was great. The one thing I love about that, Stephanie, is just how curious your kids must be when they see other things and other problems, and just making that generalization to this problem that they've researched before, even if they weren't able to solve it. So when I think about STEM, I really think about that curiosity that it builds for students. And I think one thing is that, I teach second grade. Kids enjoy it. And I think that we're not as quick to say that part of it. Like, why is it important at this grade level? Well, it's fun, first of all. Kids really, really like it. They're invested in it. And really, the skills gained from a STEM curriculum are foundational for every 21st century citizen. So it's really doing our students a disservice to not have access to a STEM curriculum. So when we think about skills kids need and adults need moving forward, they have to be able to problem solve and ask questions and think critically and collaborate. So the earlier we can begin to develop those skills, higher level thinking can happen amongst students sooner. So, I think about, as teachers, we're required to collaborate. We have, I feel like every morning I have a meeting, and I'm sure every teacher feels that way, right? However, I know when I go into those meetings that it's because that's what's best for our team. So we're going to improve our practice by collaborating, and we're going to learn from each other. And so why wouldn't that be true for students too? So I just think it's so important that students have a chance to gain these skills. And one thing I really value about the Ohio Learning Standards for Science, and correct me if I'm wrong, Stephanie, were you part of that writing committee?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that when you look at the grade band, K4, every single theme, it has one sentence and it ends with using scientific inquiry. So it's not about sitting down and doing worksheets and taking tons of assessments and just reading material. It's about our students asking questions. Are they exploring those questions? Are they testing their results? Stephanie talked about data. I mean, I cannot say enough about data. It's so critical that students are able to analyze and look at data and think about data critically, and know that, it's more than just a bar graph and a pictograph. It's about, what does this data mean, and how can we fix this problem that we have found? So, when we think about real world problem solving, that is STEM. So Stephanie gave an example, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, if she gives the same example that I do, this is going to be really funny. But if I actually took this from, for the past 2 years, I was on special assignment with the Teaching and Learning Collaborative. And when we do one of our science programs with teachers, we do this activity. So if I wrote the word apple on a piece of paper and asked you to write down everything you know about an apple based on that, you probably wouldn't be able to write much. But then if I showed you a picture of apples, you might be able to tell me a little bit more. And same thing if I showed you a physical apple, and if I cut it open in front of you and I told you more about an apple. But if I let you hold different apples and I let you compare the apples and smell them and cut them open and taste them, you'd be able to tell me even more. And so when we think about a STEM curriculum, that's really what it does. It allows students to build a deep understanding that in turn allows them to problem solve inside and outside of the classroom.
Chrissy, thank you for helping my brain grow. I feel better about what I've done for the last, and sincerely, 34 years. I don't feel good about my first 9 or 10 years, but my last 20 some I feel a lot better about based on that statement you said.
We'll send out the apology letters later.
Okay.
All our first classes.
I wanted to share something, a couple things you guys said there. First, Stephanie, you said you have twins. About what age are they?
They are 11.
Okay, so my oldest son is 30, my youngest son is 27. I want to share something. Chrissy, you said a minute ago how important it is to have your kids learn to collaborate and communicate. And we can do a better job in schools. I can do a better job. We all can do more to help children and parents understand how important of skill that is. It doesn't seem academic, but it has a lot to do with the real world. Both of my sons, I'm very proud of where they're at right now in life. And I remember when they graduated college, mommy and I, my wife and I, were so scared and praying that they would get a job that they wanted and that they felt would make them happy. But the one son who came here to Savannah came as an industrial engineer. The other son works in Columbus, Ohio for AEP Energy. But when they went to go do their interviews, they went multiple times. There would be 5, 6, 7, 8 people in a room. And then they'd go back 2 or 3 days later, there'd be 5, 6, 7, 8 people in the room again. They were not asking them one question about their accounting and finance skills. They weren't asking them any questions about their industrial engineering skills. They were trying to get to know them as people, and they were trying to have them collaborate and communicate with them so that those teams could decide, do we want this person on our team? It is so, so important that we do teach these skills to children. And I just love hearing you guys talk about it.
Yeah, it's funny, Jim, because there were several times this week I was out sick a couple days, and when I came back, we were doing an activity, and every time I went to ask my students to quit talking because I thought they were just, had some side chatter, I would stop and listen, and they were actually talking about what we were doing. And I just had to stop myself because I was just like, that's so cool.
That's what it's about. That's beautiful. Okay. So our next question is how, and you've addressed it some, but you can see if you have more to say here. How do you integrate other content areas with STEM?
Do you want to go first, Chrissy?
Sure. So when we've talked about the skills that go along with STEM, one thing that I really want to touch on and point out is this importance of computer science. So when we think about STEM, I think sometimes there, like Stephanie said, there might be a misunderstanding about what STEM means or what STEM is. And when we see that piece of technology, it's important that we have our students not just be consumers of technology, but that they're actually using the technology to produce something or solve a problem. And so one way that I really kind of took off with STEM was through computer science. And I actually knew nothing about computer science until I started. But I actually worked with, I was a participant with the Teaching and Learning Collaborative and Tech Core, and I implemented this E4 Tech program that was a 3-module program for my third graders, and it was mathematics and computer science, and it had circuits and robotics, and it was just incredible. And it really opened my eyes to all of the skills that students need and that computer scientists use that don't even use a device. And so when I think about STEM, one way to really integrate it is, I would say, if you're nervous about the technology part, you do not have to be an expert. So I would say the first thing that's important about integrating it is knowing that you don't have to be the expert. You don't have to have a ton of devices. You personally don't have to have a lot of background knowledge. You can learn alongside your students. And so when we think, I looked at OSLN, and when we look at the STEM jobs, 67% of all new jobs in STEM are in computing, and only 11% of STEM bachelor's degrees are in computer science. And so when we think about STEM, I think we think about a lot of the cool inquiry, science, hands-on, problem-based learning. So I just want to put a plug in there for computer science. And if you look at the Ohio Computer Science Standards, Kelly and I were a part of the writing committee, or actually Kelly was not. She kind of helped lead the writing committee. They are written in a way so that they already connect to what you're doing in your classroom. So we actually looked at the math and the ELA and the science standards as we created those. So if you are intimidated by computer science, I would say check out your standards, check out OSLN, and there are a lot of really good resources out there.
Thank you.
I just want to add one comment. When my first granddaughter was 1 year old, she showed me how to use my iPhone. I had not a clue what she was doing, but she couldn't talk, but she was showing me how to use the iPhone. So they have no fear, where I keep thinking I'm going to break something.
No, they don't.
Janet, what'll be great, folks, this is Janet Horelko who was just speaking. What'll be great, Janet, is if your granddaughter can teach you how to use Google Slides. That's a little inside joke, everybody. We're teasing here. I'm teasing her.
Oh,
We love
well,
Janet.
she probably knows.
Love it.
I wanted to add something bouncing off of what Chrissy said. When STEM first became on the forefront and people were talking about it and talking about the importance of it, I'll never forget this, because I was at, I forget where I was at, but they held up a pencil, and they actually said, this is a piece of technology. And there was a misunderstanding about technology having to be digital. Same with the pen. You go from a pencil to a pen and you push that down. And again, there's a lever, there's things in here, there's springs. Somebody has solved a problem with how to, store the ink, get it to flow. You think about scissors, okay? These are all simple tools. They're not the tools that a lot of you associate when you hear STEM, but technology in and of itself, when you look up the definition, it's the application of scientific knowledge for practical purposes. So it's kind of taken some of the scare out, especially for people at home. You think about, I don't know how many of you do this, but when you can't get a pickle jar open or a spaghetti jar open, it's not anything fancy. You're going to take something that's going to loosen it. And usually I take a butter knife. I don't know how many of you do, but or if I can't reach a cereal box, before I'd get frustrated, well, I have tongs, I can now become longer, and a lot of these small little things that you probably do all the time, you just haven't put it into, what's the word I want? Into your playground of, this is actual real life world problem solving. We're doing it all the time. It's just, we may not be talking about it, or we may not be viewing it. And that's why I keep referring to that STEM, that acronym, because a lot of people get hung up on it. And it's really just communicating, problem solving together. So, but I'll never forget that when somebody said, this is technology, and they held up a pencil, and I'm like, that's not technology. It's the first thing I went to, because I was tied into what each
Yes.
letter meant. So
Yes.
I just wanted to share a little bit about that.
Great. All right. So we have one last question, and I'm going to be biting my tongue because I may add in on this one. It's a passion of mine, especially for these last 2.5 years with COVID. So the last question we have is, how are you handling learning loss in your classroom, or philosophically, how are you handling learning loss?
Um,
And due to COVID, due to
So
everything that's happened in the last 2.5 years.
it wasn't just learning loss, it was social emotional as well, and kids knowing how to work together. And that's why I think it's really important to, you know, we went as far as our playground was separated out. So they only played with their class, and a lot of schools did that. And so it was really giving them the opportunities to still learn together and interact, but meeting them where they're at. And I see a lot of that with my twins, especially my daughter. And I've had to look at how I approach things differently and find that connection. And one of the things that I've recently shared with, my daughter's teachers are the extended learning standards that the state of Ohio has created. And I highly recommend any teacher look at those, because it's, they're usually for kids that have a lot of difficulty, cognitive disabilities. But the really cool thing about them is they're a natural scaffold. So like, it goes from the least complex to the most complex. So even parents at home, when they see this worksheet, which I am now doing 6th grade math and whatnot, and tiered timelines and things like I have no experience with, but finding ways to connect it and figuring out, well, what do they really need to know? So I've had to really go about breaking those steps down for not just my own, children, but kids in my classroom. Another thing that there's been a lot of research about is lightening the executive load. And simply what that means is, a lot of kids come in struggling with their math facts, for example. Give them that chart, because now maybe you're moving to subtraction with regrouping. Well, if they're still like this, they're not learning that next process, because their executive functioning is taking so much energy to get the first thing done. And so some people might look at it as a crutch, but it doesn't mean they're never going to learn them. You're just giving them the tool to keep moving them forward instead of sitting there in frustration. And so a lot of that learning loss, I saw it a lot last year. I think Chrissy would agree that last year for most of our colleagues, myself, anybody we worked with, was probably the hardest year in education of all the COVID years. And that was the number one reason why. And so we just kept persevering, taught a lot of patience, because you had all kids coming at you at the same time. They hadn't learned that give and take. All the problem solving skills we're talking about, they wanted you to solve their problem. They didn't have, they weren't used to it, because at home, if mom and dad were with them, they're like, they could ask and it was immediate, just like technology, immediate. And it's kind of like slow in the roll, and okay, take a step back, look, listen, think about, and do. And that took it wasn't until like really the last couple of weeks of school where I felt like, okay. And it's nice to hear the 5th grade teachers now, it's a lot better, but they're still seeing it. There's a certain group that missed a lot of interactions with people that we're still catching up. And in order to learn correctly, you need that communication piece. So
Stephanie, I was going to piggyback on something you said right there. Hopefully I won't steal Chrissy's thunder if she was going to go here.
Okay.
When you made the comment about at school, you're saying at schools there might be some teachers, not all, but there might be some teachers who are becoming more and more skilled at asking a problem or putting kids in problem situations and then not giving them solution. Let the kids persevere, right? Let them fail some. And then you made the comment about at some homes, maybe some parents don't do that, or grandparents or aunts and uncles or whoever those caretakers are. Sometimes maybe they're not letting their children do that as much. And so we may have some parents out here right now, a phrase that somebody told me a while back that I've really latched on to: parents, it's okay when our children are faced with any kind of a problem, anything about anything, literally anything, not about school either. But when they're faced with a situation that's a problem, it's okay to let your child it's okay for us to let our students fall and scrape their knee. We just don't want to let them fall and break their leg. So you really have to try to make those judgments as a parent and as an educator. When is it okay to let a child fail a little part of a task or something in real life, because you know it's not going to hurt them that bad, and they might actually learn a whole lot from it. And it's a really important skill. I think it kind of goes with what you were saying a minute ago.
It does in a lot of ways, but by no means did I mean it as in, they were home doing this learning with their kids or trying to. And I faced this thing
Yes.
for especially kids with special needs. It was not a good situation for any type of child. I mean, most of the kids struggled. Especially you see it a lot in math, because math is so concrete. And then you can you're doing it virtually. So unless they have the things in front of them, so you're trying to make it as concrete, but it's abstract, and that creates learning loss. But a lot of what I meant is they weren't letting, what I noticed is, they wanted to help them so much, which isn't a bad thing. You want parent involvement.
Yes.
They didn't have the stamina. They didn't have the perseverance to work through it. They just kind of waited instead of using what I always tell my kids: use what you know, start with what you know. And
it's great advice.
And the nice part is, like I said, the parent involvement was huge. So in a lot of ways it was great, but then in a lot of ways I know parents were frustrated, especially if they didn't understand it. So
Yes.
I'm glad we've moved out of that situation. I think you're starting to see that partnership with parents and teachers more and more with the communicating, like even our conferences recently. I was explaining why we do it and how we do it. And I still hear this: well, that wasn't the way I was taught. I'm like, I know. And it's okay that it wasn't the way you were taught. And it's okay for you to show them, because what it's teaching them is there's more than one way to solve a problem. So instead of fearing it, it's working together to build that relationship.
Awesome.
So I apologize, Chrissy, that I went a little too long.
Oh, you're okay.
We're good. We're good on time.
Do I have time to add something?
Absolutely.
Kim?
Absolutely.
I'm really bothered by the term learning loss, I think, because I think it implies that students regressed. And I think that's a misconception of what happened over the last 2 years with COVID. I think that there are a lot of gaps in learning, and that might be because students were virtual or a mixture of both, or they missed a lot of school. And I know, Jim, I'm going to say what I know you want to say. That
Bring it on. Bring it on. I love it.
As teachers, we do what we do for kids. So no matter if COVID never happened and that group of students came in your room and that was the same makeup, you would do the same thing. You would meet kids where they were. You would give them opportunities and experiences to learn and gain the skills that they don't yet have. And you would work to fill those gaps. And it's the same now. And like Stephanie said, there are a lot. I'm noticing more of the social emotional gaps versus the academic gaps. And so one thing that I would definitely encourage you to do is, when students don't have these skills that we think they need, rather than avoiding it, we need to give them more of it. And so it's going to be hard to have your kids work together in groups. It's going to be difficult to have them solve the problems or be the thinkers, especially if for the last 2 years they have not had as much experience doing that. But rather than shying away from it, we need to give them more of those experiences so they can gain those skills. And I think really knowing the learning progressions is critical. So even outside of your learning standards, so for mathematics, Michael Batista's progressions are phenomenal. I know Joe Bowler has a lot of great work out there, Graham Fletcher. So really knowing, like Stephanie said, what do your kids need to know and how can you get them there? And what skills do they have? I think a lot of times we, as teachers, we really focus on, oh, students aren't able to do X. But when we can figure out what students can do, we can build on that to develop the skills that they still need to obtain. And so I really think that it's important that we shift that focus. And it's not what students can't do, it's what can your students do.
Chrissy, which would kind of play off of the roofer who said there aren't really problems. There's just opportunities for solutions.
Absolutely.
Let's look at
Absolutely.
the positive way to attack things, and let's try to have
Absolutely.
everybody be there. I'm right. Thank you so much for saying all that. I was going to add one thing that I think fits in with it. I'm in the math world, so we have the Ohio Council of Teachers of Mathematics. We have the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, and then there's also NCSM. Over the last 2.5 years, I would read a lot of research, people saying, a lot of people are going to say like the deficit teaching model and what are kids not coming to you with from one grade to the next. But those three big, powerful organizations begged and stated that they hoped that teachers would try to teach lessons that started on grade level. I'm going to say that again. They were hoping that teachers would try to teach lessons that start on grade level. I'm in a very large urban district down in Hamilton, Butler County. It's Hamilton City Schools. And we have an incredible administrative team, and we have incredible teachers, and I love our families and our kids. But we are definitely diverse. And I'm so proud for the last 2.5 years that our teachers are trying to do that. I'm in tons of our rooms all throughout the year, grades 6 through 8, but I know K through 8, I know that through the 12th grade, teachers are trying to do lessons on grade level because we keep preaching that, and we keep trying to hold our teachers up and say, come on, start there, then support the people who are having a hard time getting there, but then still keep challenging, because some kids, believe it or not, we're not seeing any learning loss, and they're soaring just as high as they have before. And we want to make sure we're allowing them to do that too. But we've been doing that, and we're getting extremely good growth scores. Like you can have achievement scores and you can have growth scores that come back from the state of Ohio, and we also get it from NWEA MAP. And for the last 2.5 years, I couldn't be more proud of the growth that our teachers are getting from our kids. And this is after or during COVID. So I would encourage all the educators that are listening to this to really try to beat that drum and try to convince your colleagues, hey, let's try to start with on grade level tasks in any subject area, and then let's provide support where it's needed beyond that. And one last thing, Stephanie, you hit a sore spot with me.
Okay.
I'm teasing. I'm totally teasing you. I'm just teasing you. But
I'm like, it's fair. Go ahead.
I'm totally kidding. It's that whole math facts thing. Because I was the only teacher of my kids for grades 6, 7, and 8 for 29 years. I never saw a difference from year 1 to year 29. I always had a bell curve of students who were fast with their facts versus students who were slow with their facts versus people in the middle. Chrissy mentioned Joe Bowler a bit ago, and I just couldn't agree with Joe Bowler more. I know you guys are the same line of thinking. Speed isn't what matters. Help the child understand the concept. 3 times 5 is not 15 because you flip over a card and it says 1 5 on the back of it. 3 times 5 is 15 because of the multiple ways that we can see 3 groups of 5 or 5 groups of 3. And when we help children understand that, especially down at your guys' grade levels, we are making the world in mathematics and science and real life, we're making the world a better place, because math is not just a bunch of numbers that are meant to be memorized. Facts aren't memorization things, right? Sorry, I went off on my soapbox, but I think we are on time now. So now
Jim,
I think
you're speaking my language.
okay?
You're speaking my language.
I just can't believe you mentioned Graham Fletcher. I believe it's Graham Fletcher that has the cards. Anybody that's on here that works with elementary students, I tell our 6th, 7th, 8th grade teachers, if your children aren't fast with their facts and you really want to help them get better at them, then pull out Graham Fletcher's dot cards. Those dot cards make the child count the arrays and see 4 rows of 2 or 5 rows of 7 or 8. Make them count them and see them and tell you what the answer is, and then have them write their facts. There's so many ways you could use that, but it helps that would fit STEM in the end. Like they're going to be making reasoning of these patterns that are sitting there. And then the more things make sense, you're able to go further and further in whatever subjects we're trying to teach. Okay, guys, my last thing.
I believe the patterns piece is one of the mathematical practices as well.
Yes, it is. Sure is.
So,
7 and 8.
from the science person.
so I have I love it. So I have one last thing here, and then we'll turn it over to Janet, I believe.
You got to advance the slides so we can get down to
Oh,
mine.
sorry. I told you, I was doing pretty good for the first few slides. Okay, and I will do that here in just a second, but just this is just 30 seconds or less. I had a notice and wonder. My notice is that you two teachers are incredible.
Thank you.
The way you're speaking about everything is incredible. It's brightened my night, and I promise you, I've learned a lot, and I appreciate that. I'm so excited about what we have going on in our elementary world. But my wonder was, I have a granddaughter named Maeve, and she's 20 months old. She lives in Plain City. My wonder is, could either one of you move over to Jonathan Older so that my granddaughter would have you someday?
I have done professional development in
Oh,
Jonathan.
okay. We'll have to. Oh, really? Great. Okay.
So their teachers are working to get professional development in mathematics. So Jim, I think you have
Boom.
something to look forward to.
I love it. I'm all in. All right. All right, Janet, I will get the slides up to where they need to be. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I have not, we're having a little trouble with the chat thing. Kelly got it to go to everybody, but I don't see any questions. Kelly, do you see any questions in there from the people that have been attending the meeting?
I don't know if chat's enabled for them.
Yeah, it should have been, but you know.
Pencils.
Speaking about the multiplying, I do remember when the ORC was evaluating lesson plans, Steve Miller and I had quite a knockdown drag out about this one. It was whether it was for a new teacher or not, but the essence of the lesson was, if you draw 2 lines down and 3 lines across, how many intersections do you have?
Love it. Love it.
And that way they could see 2 times 3 or 3 times 2. And it was, can a novice teacher do this? And that was where the 2 of us were kind of at each other. And we finally had to come to a compromise about recommending this lesson, because he was thinking, no, they couldn't do it. And I'm going, yes, they can. Yes, they can. So it was, I love the drawing the lines. That has helped my grandkids so conceptualize it. One of them loves to use Unifix cubes. She does everything. Okay, it's also because Grammy got rid of her Unifix cubes by dumping it down there. They, she would put the colors together, and she can do it that way. And the other one, everything's in her head. So doing the lines on a piece of paper was great, but that was long ago and far away. But I will share, since nobody's made a comment that I can read to you, the last thing I did yes, I'm known as the grandmother that does math, and the oldest grandchild said, nobody loves math like Grammy.
Love it.
But last year she said to us, I hate geometry. Well, she said it to the wrong people. All she has heard about is angles and measures and how can you lift things from certain, if you're a crane and so forth. So she got the idea that a triangle is 180 degrees and so does a straight line. Do that fold in the corners thing to get the straight line.
Yes.
Kelly posted that people, if there's anybody that had any questions, that you should be able to comment now in the chat. Even if somebody just wants to say hi, so we know it actually worked. Besides a panelist, would be very beneficial.
There is one more. So I see, sorry, there's one question about great websites for STEM lessons. I don't have a specific lesson, but I did see in our panelist chat, Kelly and Nancy shared, if you're not familiar with 5 practices for orchestrating productive mathematics discussions by Margaret Smith. She has that for math and science. And that book is like my Bible in my classroom. If you want to get your students talking about mathematics, that book is a must-have. Try it, keep trying it. It's not going to be easy. It might not turn out the way you want it the first time. and just keep doing it. That is my number one recommendation, is try something and keep trying it. And when you think about giving an answer, ask a question instead.
Love it.
And one of the things, if I can just jump in here just for a minute, I teach graduate school and I use this book for my K through 8 teachers. But if you're really interested in this book, you might go to the Ohio Mathematics and Science Coalition website, because Peg Smith was our speaker at one of our meetings. And she has a fabulous conversation about using task and using those 5 practices, which are anticipating, monitoring, selecting, sequencing, and collaboration with students. So if you're interested in that, check it out on the OMSC website. I'll put the link in the chat, and I think maybe Kelly, you'll have to copy it, or maybe you could just put it in there. Also, Frances Sue, who is a past president of the Ohio section of the MAA, was one of our guest speakers, along with Anthony Edmonds from Ohio State. And you can also find that on our website. And he is a great one for talking about what do you wonder. And so you might find that very interesting too. And you can listen to it in your own time, as many times as you want. It's on our YouTube channel.
I will also share, because I feel like I can. We actually have a ton of free resources on our website, and I would point you, especially for pre-K through grade 4, our Math Campin resources have been funded by American Electric Power. There's a ton of great kind of tasks that students can engage in, and a lot of great family engagement components. The other is Sidekick. So if you go at the top menu bar, you'll see Sidekick. We just have a ton of lessons from different grants over the years that we put there as kind of just exemplars for great math and science tasks. So feel free to check those out. And if you don't find something, just email us, because we probably have it from over the years.
Like a great teacher, things to get teachers thinking differently, and
Yeah,
to
when
have
you-
a teaching and learning collaborative.
Janet, when you were talking about the lines, I was just thinking about all the development with K2 Impact that you and Steve were involved in. And I think Joanne's on here too. So it was kind of a fun little memory.
Yeah, thank you. Jim, can you switch to the last slide so I can tell everybody about the feedback form? This is, again, what Nancy read in the beginning. We want to thank OCTM, the Ohio PTA, the Ohio MATIC, Ohio section of the MAA, SECO, OMELC, and the Ohio Technology and Engineering Educators Association for helping sponsor our webinars by sending out information to their groups and to teachers, and for ODE for sending that out to everybody as well, especially because it doesn't cost anything to get this information. But we truly want to thank Kelly Shrewsbury for her talent, especially for someone who has all the back issues that I have about not knowing what to do. And she helped create a feedback form for us that's at the bottom of your screen. If you can tap on that, and it should bring up a form. And if you can fill that out, that would be marvelous. And we thank you very much for attending, and to our panelists, that you're just brilliant. And thank you for being so wonderful, creating students who are curious and engaging and problem solvers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then a special thank you to Jim, Janet, and to Kim for organizing this. It's been a fantastic opportunity. And tell your friends, because this webinar will be available on the OMSC website.
And let me, I will put the, I'll try to get the, never mind, the feedback form is in the chat. Thank you, Kelly, once again, solving my problems, being too slow. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye, guys.
Thank you.